Like you have no intention of doing something and you just get drawn into doing it.
So it's not a function of not wanting to do it. It's one of those things that I know I need to do.
You're pretty vulnerable if you're relying on another country for energy.
Energy is really at the forefront of public conversation.
And think about how much your kids can learn when they're interested in something. Well, Jake, I'm very excited for this conversation. We've talked a number of times before, and we've been talking about trying to get on and doing a podcast together. And so here we are, my man.
I'm excited, dude. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, what you've been doing, your story is really incredible. I know that we've talked about it offline, but I think that would probably be a great place to start, just talking through how you got into what you're doing now, and we'll let it flow from there.
Yeah, I'll kind of start off with what we're doing now and give a little brief background as to kind of how we got here. There's been a lot of turns, a lot of pivots along the way. So co-founded Digital Wildcatters in 2018 with two partners. We essentially, Digital Wildcatters was born out of starting a podcast. And so we started a podcast called the Oil and Gas Startups Podcast. And I had been a tech founder in oil and gas a few different times. And we were talking to a lot of Silicon Valley VCs, myself and Colin, a lot of New York VCs about energy tech. And we've been kind of very actively involved in that community and helping kind of foster and cultivate that community for a while. And everybody said, where can we go to learn about this? And there really wasn't a place. And so we started this podcast. We had a bunch of our friends on, didn't think anything of it. It was so niche. We didn't think anybody was going to listen to it. And it blew up. And so with that coupled along with, we started hosting just little happy hours and stuff at our office. First one out the gate, we had 300 people show up. I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. So we kept doing that. The events continued to evolve kind of over time. And then we launched more podcasts and then got into video content. We ended up buying some oil wells up in Oklahoma in like late 2018 and vlogged the whole process. That ended up going viral. We were like, okay, well, this is interesting. And so eventually we consolidated everything underneath like the Digital Wildcatters name, which was really originally just the name of our YouTube, and just was kind of just doing the whole part-time thing, never really trying to make money on this. Wasn't supposed to be a business. In 2020, we exited everything else that we were involved in and went all in. And then of course, oil goes negative 37, COVID hits. And so it was like, this is the absolute worst time to have done this. But it ended up being like a really good thing because everybody was stuck in their house and they were looking for content. And so we just did what we knew and just shipped a whole lot more stuff, launched newsletters, launched more podcasts and things like that. Since then, the events have grown. We've had over 9,000 attendees at our various events. Empower, the one that we'll probably dive into is really at the intersection of Bitcoin mining and energy. We had 1,200 attendees. It was pretty much like a who's who of anybody who's doing stuff in Bitcoin mining. A lot of the big energy producers there. Now everybody in energy is Bitcoin mining, which is super cool. Gearing up for our biggest swing yet, Fuse conference that we're having here in October, really bringing together all of energy. It's a huge swing in terms of doing the impossible. So bringing together oil and gas, renewables, hydrogen, nuclear, battery technology. We're the largest energy tech conference in the world, and really just solidifying Houston as energy capital of the world. That's kind of where we're at today. Like I said, I founded a few different companies early on, got out of the Marine Corps in 2012, started my first company in 2013 in oil and gas, didn't know anything about oil and gas. So it's kind of like trial by fire, fell in love with the industry, kind of rinsed and repeated a few different times. Met Colin in 2016. We were always trying to figure out a way to work together. He came from the field, just being a roughneck, running wireline, things like that. Then he quit his job and we went all in on bunch of different things. So that's kind of the short version of kind of our backstory.
It's really interesting. And I feel like you have a very interesting view of the industry because you really are within this niche, as you mentioned, so I'm curious because obviously depending on who you're talking to, you're going to have a different view on the particular industry. But what about this industry are you most excited about? Are there any types of things that you think that the broader public should be paying attention to, and then maybe even just people who are in the industry like miners? Like what kind of are those critical insights that you're kind of seeing in your position here?
Man, I think for the first time in history, at least in modern history, at least in my lifetime, energy is really at the forefront of public conversation when it comes to things like climate change and obviously its close relationship with energy production. You're looking at things like now, like, really high gas prices and people are kind of wondering, and you look at like things like Google keywords right now. A lot of people are really trying to figure out why are things the way that they are. And then you've got the energy crisis that we're experiencing in New England, the energy crisis obviously over in Europe with a lot of the implications between, things like Germany and Russia, and then there's a lot more geopolitical implications between Russia and China and things like that. And so it's interesting. And so people, obviously, you look at that kind of coupled up with a lot of like really, really public goals to kind of get to, like a net zero carbon emissions, some that are extremely aggressive and extremely unrealistic. I can't think of a more important thing to really be working on than helping raise the world's energy IQ, both inside of energy and us also kind of uniting all of energy instead of it being these kind of religious sects of, oil and gas hating renewables and kind of vice versa. And then all the Bitcoin stuff too, like also just kind of working on the future of like financial policy and really the intersection of that between energy. So I'm super stoked about the work that we're doing. I just can't think of anything more important to be working on.
Yeah. And I think what really stood out there is like when you're talking about renewables versus oil and gas versus whatever, like the different energy sources, it is kind of crazy how tribal that has become. I feel like as humans, it's kind of in our nature to just be very tribal. And, you see it in politics. We're seeing it in the energy sector. And I myself, I don't come from like a huge career in energy. I've been learning about it through the work that I've been doing in Bitcoin and having to do that for the business. But it's kind of crazy how many times my views have changed on energy sources, renewables, just learning how things operate and work, and then how that all ties to value in society. And I think you're so right. I've never heard it put that way, but it has almost become like a religious type of like, I'm planting my flag in the ground and it's like I'm for this and against that. And at the end of the day, it disconnects you from really understanding like what it is. And I think that's what you're getting at to a certain degree, is like being energy literate and understanding like what it's doing. Like some people just think like, they think about, not everyone, but they think about energy in like light switches. Like, like if I turn on this light switch, then it uses like this much more energy, but it's not that. It's like what is actually going into powering your house, powering your air conditioning, powering the lights around us. And I think it's pretty clear that if you ask anyone, your standard of living would be a lot worse without energy. And a lot of people in the West, you can't imagine what your life would be like without energy.
Energy is the most important technology that was ever created to be able for us to harness the power of energy to create modern civilization. I look at that as like base layer of civilization, because without that, you don't have electricity. Without electricity, you don't have the internet. Without the internet, you don't have all the amazing things that we've been able to do as a modern society.
Yeah. And even just
people
like food
just
production.
don't understand that. Yeah, food production. Think about that. Like think about back in the day of hunters and gatherers, of spending your entire day just figuring out where we're going to get your next few meals.
Yeah. Well, that's like one of the things, like with what you mentioned, like with what's happening geopolitically, like energy insecurity, thinking about like, hey, if you're a country, you're pretty vulnerable if you're relying on another country for energy. It's almost like a way to wage war. And then with all the money printing and then the inflation, it's like, what the hell is going to happen here?
It's not enough to just have cheap, abundant, reliable energy. Secure is now one of those kind of requirements and something that everybody's thinking about.
The other thing that's crazy is we've seen like blackouts and things happen at times in the US. Like that's almost like a and you know this better than almost anyone else. It's just like the way that it works. It's not like if you need 100 gigawatts of power, insert X number of amount of power. It's not like you're always going to need that amount of power. There's going to be times where you need more than that or less than that. And you have to overbuild to account for the total needs of whenever it works. And it's just crazy how much people take it for granted that it just works. Things just work. And without people out there working hard and making things work, then it doesn't work. It's just like crazy. It's like if no one grows the food or makes the food, then you don't have food. And people look at it so much as like a zero-sum game. And they need to take more for their side. Whereas at the end of the day, you just need to produce more. Because if you produce more, then there's more for everyone. And that's what I hate about this whole energy transition term. And I hate that the branding, because there's like negative connotation that we're going to be getting off of fossil fuels or eliminating fossil fuels in my lifetime, my kids' lifetimes. And I just don't foresee that happening. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it just doesn't look like it's going to be likely. What I do see is an energy addition, because we're going to need more energy in perpetuity as the world continues to grow and as energy consumption continues to grow, and it's growing dramatically. So it's not just like, we're going to take all these renewables and replace oil and gas. No, you're going to have oil and gas as your base load. You can add in a lot more renewables, add in hydro, add in hydrogen, add in nuclear. And that's why we need a lot of innovation in each one of these parts of the energy technology sector. Yeah, and I share that sentiment. I think that you're going to just see more and more energy come online, energy get layered in, and that's what makes civilization more productive, right? You don't become a type 1, type 2 civilization traveling amongst the stars by harnessing less energy.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think it's important to harness more. I'm curious from your perspective on the energy side, what do you see as like the main pros and cons to each of these energy sources? Like, how are you looking at that? Because obviously you're going to have more energy being added over time, but what do you see as like the pros and cons to some of these different kinds of energy sources?
I mean, oil and gas is kind of obvious. It's cheap, it's abundant, it's extremely reliable. Obviously, there's the emissions side, but if you look at a lot of the work that the oil and gas industry is doing right now, they're doing a significant amount to actually clean that up themselves. And you look at renewables, it's very much, I guess one of the downfalls is that it really depends on geographically whether it's going to necessarily work. And there's certain areas where there's like no cloud coverage and solar works phenomenal. There's certain areas where there's tons of wind and the wind works phenomenal. But one of the biggest, I guess, Achilles heels of renewables is actually storage. It's actually battery storage. And so until we see major leaps and bounds in the battery storage to be able to transition from being just an intermittent power source to being something that can actually be baseload in the same way that natural gas or coal is, or nuclear, then I think it's going to be really, really hard for that to get more of the market share without sacrificing the reliability that we so like desperately need. When you look at like Winter Storm Uri here in Texas, and you had like people die. You had people die in Texas in 2021. That's mind-blowing due to the fact that we lost power. Okay, so like reliability is super, super important. Hydro, obviously, you're limited geographically. Geothermal, currently limited geographically. There's some new geothermal techniques, but none of those are necessarily commercialized. And so it's a lot of R&D dollars is going into that. I think it shows a lot of promise, but I mean, that's kind of like the ultimate form of renewable energy in my mind. You're just taking heat from the earth, which as long as we're around, the heat from the earth is going to be there. So nuclear, super bullish on nuclear. There's a lot of really, really innovative things that are coming out. I've talked to a couple of nuclear companies this week, just looping them into kind of our Fuse conference and seeing the innovation that these guys are working on. They're raising a significant amount of money, building some really, really cool stuff. Obviously, the downfall there is the fact that there's been nuclear accidents. And and so everybody is like, I don't really necessarily want that in my backyard. But I think that's a huge mistake. And the technology's come a long, long ways. And we've seen a ton of innovation there. If nuclear was created today, we would say this is the most amazing invention ever and all of our energy problems are solved. But the reality is, people are scared. So
yeah, it's crazy how divisive like nuclear, like as a power source is, because everything from like the technology behind nuclear power makes it an ideal energy source, but there are the obvious downsides which like people like attack the power source for. So it's a very divisive issue, but it's one of those things where I think that to advance to the next level of human civilization, I think nuclear plays a big part in that. And I don't know like when or how that really takes off, but I mean, we're sitting on a, as you mentioned, like unbelievable technology. Who knows how that's going to play out?
Yeah, and a lot of the innovation is actually it's not creating these large power plants that you would kind of think. I think that's going to be part of it, but a lot of them it's actually really, really small nuclear reactors that could fit into, say, like a container, right? And you could do like kind of like emergency response to certain things, and you can power and set up essentially a microgrid, which we'd done that. Colin and one of our guys had went during one of the last hurricanes in Louisiana and did it with set up little renewable like solar grids, microgrids to help power some of the houses that have lost a significant amount of power. You can do the same thing with nuclear.
So kind of changing gears to like the Bitcoin mining side, right? You've been speaking with all these guys in the energy sector. A lot of times, well, I guess this was more so early on, but for example, when I first really started diving into the industry, so as mining started in 2018, the sophistication around the energy side in the industry was very, very different than it is now, right?
Yeah.
And so you're over here talking to a lot of energy companies, and I've been through that exact same thing, going through that education process, explaining, okay, what is Bitcoin mining? What is Bitcoin? How does all this stuff tie in? And there are some people obviously in energy who you're going to see are more innovative, and then you're going to have people who are more of the laggards, like in anything. Yeah. And so you're obviously speaking with a lot of the guys who are the innovators within the energy sector, and they're going and dipping their toe into mining. And so from your perspective, how are these guys looking at it? Like if you were going to put them on like a track of like how far down the rabbit hole they are, what their general views are on mining, it's kind of a tough question. It's kind of broad, but like, what's your general sense of where these guys are at? And yeah, I mean,
I think it depends. You can't really make any like broad generalizations. Like you said, you've got some people that are just extremely innovative. And this applies to like the application of energy technology across organizations, period, not just Bitcoin mining. You have some that are just so cutting edge because they truly understand what's possible with technology, and you have other ones that it's, they're oil men, they're not technology guys, and so they don't know what
cash flow.
Yeah, they don't know what they don't know, and so you can't necessarily fault them for that. And so I kind of give those guys a lot more grace than I used to. A lot of the larger energy companies, I won't say all of them, but a lot of them are Bitcoin mining. And whether they want to talk about it or not, a lot of the oilfield service companies are finding ways to do Bitcoin mining. A lot of the renewable guys are finding ways to do Bitcoin mining. So it's something that everybody's paying attention to. I think one of the biggest advantages of that is it can dramatically help you improve the economics of assets that necessarily weren't very economical prior, especially when you're looking at things like flared natural gas, right? You're making absolutely no money. You're having to get flared permits. And then you're also releasing a significant amount of methane into the air. You've got guys like Crusoe who've come along and have taken take the flared gas, put it into a natural gas generator, use that to mine in these data centers. And so, I mean, now you're able to get some revenue either from the gas, or you have some of the operators who are going in and just doing all that themselves. I don't know what the numbers look like now, but I know at $50,000 Bitcoin, I was seeing net max per MCF of like $35. And so when you're looking at gas that you're selling to the market, the Henry Hub, it's $5 an MCF, and you can get essentially $35 an MCF. It really begs the question: why would you sell gas to the market?
Chase, the CEO of Crusoe, he's been on the podcast before,
okay,
and he kind of broke down like the incentives, right, for the companies who are currently flaring, and then, hey, rather than needing to go with the traditional route and deal with the flare, like the flare gas from these wells, you can actually monetize it for Bitcoin mining. That's like one of the areas where the incentives are just so clearly aligned. It's like, oh, duh, like,
yeah,
you should definitely be doing, like, companies should be doing this. And obviously Crusoe, like, they're incredible. They're doing a lot of work and expanding. And I think that, the more people that do that, the better. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with, at the end of the day, it's like, where are you going to get value? There's clearly the potential to harness value from an activity like that, the multiple benefits. And so building a business model around that to actually implement it, it's like, yeah, we should do this.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, and we really should be flaring absolutely zero natural gas. And so I think we'll see that happen. I don't know if it's realistic to say the next few years, but eventually.
Yeah. And aren't there like a lot of, I guess you might understand the economics better. Like, my current understanding is that a lot of times when there's flaring going on, there's not like a lot of power there that, like, in these wells, for example, like maybe like 1 to 5 megawatts maybe, right? And so, like, you kind of have to build a business model around that where it's not like you're going and partnering with like a utility or a large energy company and building like a mega facility. It's more so building these more modular type solutions that you can put by the wells.
It depends. It depends on the well, and you really have to know that kind of going in. If you want to be the best, most efficient Bitcoin mining operation, and you're starting kind of from scratch, going out and necessarily buying wells, I wouldn't say necessarily is your best bet, and so you can really like make a lot of money on the buy, because what you want to secure is reliable and most cheapest power you can possibly find. And so I think in a lot of ways going on grid can do that, and especially with some of these power purchase agreements and some of the demand response stuff, like some of the stuff we've seen with Riot and some of these other guys, you make money whether you're on or you make money whether you're off. And to me, that is a great business. Now, but if you're an E&P and you're looking to reduce your carbon footprint and just make a little extra cash where you're not making anything currently, then yes, mining off grid is fantastic. Not saying that you can't build a substantial operation doing solely, Bitcoin mining off of flared gas, but I think it comes with a lot of domain expertise, and I think it's going to be oil and gas guys like the guys like over at J Energy, Justin Ballard, or Ryan Leachman, or Griffin and Ivan Piney over at Olympia Creek, guys who've got a significant amount of experience in oil and gas, who can really, you're not going to have Chinese miners come in and buy all these oil and gas wells and have absolutely no oil and gas experience and thrive. Like, you're gonna have, it's much harder than people think it is.
So if you were to, one of my favorite things to like get people's takes on, I have it's a 2-part question for you. It's like a prediction question, right? So like, let's say that you're dropped into the future and you're looking at how the energy sector looks and at how the Bitcoin mining industry looks. And we can take these one at a time. I'd actually be more curious to start with the energy side. So like, you're dropped in 10 years from now, it's 2032. What do you think is the biggest difference energy operates in that type of a world 10 years into the future versus what you're seeing today?
My vision for the future, and it's a big part of our mission as a company would to see more collaboration and to see energy come together under a single banner, because we're all solving the same problems, but we're not really working together in the capacity that we should be. And so my hope is that you would see, and you're seeing a lot of this, you're seeing a lot of oil and gas companies diversifying their portfolios to become more like energy, more broader energy, or like resource companies, so they could have, the product lines could look like oil and gas, hydrogen, they could get into nuclear, they can get into hydro, they can get into all sorts of things. You're seeing us like Dow Chemical, for example, just partner with X Energy to be able to lower their emissions through these small modular nuclear reactors. And so you're seeing a lot of this collaboration. I think we need to see it like 100x over. So that's my vision for to where these energy companies really do become, they do diversify their portfolios of products that they're delivering to the public.
Got it. So it's more like, rather than there being like the oil and gas companies and then the solar companies or whatever, and the hydro companies, it's more so like, oh, you're an energy company, you have some here, some there, some there.
Yep.
And okay, interesting. And then on the Bitcoin mining side, same type of thing. Right now, so the next halving is coming up in just under 2 years, 2024 in May, I believe. So in terms of halving cycles, that puts us at a pretty interesting time, because 10 years from now, you're going to be, 3 halvings in, right?
Yeah,
so,
I think so.
Yeah, so what do you think the mining sector looks like at that point in time?
10 years, dude, I think you're going to have so much capital that's going to flow into the space that you're probably going to see massive consolidation. We've already seen it. We've already started to see it, especially with some of these companies going bankrupt recently, and some of these organizations just going and gobbling people up. But I think you're going to see it, like the ones who are able to access the cheapest capital and then build projects on the cheapest energy are the ones who are going to thrive. And so I'm sure you're going to have a couple just absolute behemoths like the Riots and the Argos, and probably some more that are just going to pop up out of the woodwork. And then I think there's probably not going to be a whole lot in the middle. And I think you're going to have a whole lot of the smaller mining shops.
It's
just extrapolating out kind of what we have now, but I think just at a much larger scale.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of consolidation too, like in the industry, like not just in the mining sector, but like across the entire ecosystem. And that definitely makes sense. I mean, think about where Bitcoin's going to be at that point.
Yeah.
Like the price per Bitcoin.
What's your 10-year projection?
I'm going to sound like a lunatic if I say it out loud. Well, I'll caveat it with this. I think that it also will depend like where in the cycle you are at that point. So like it depends if we're really in like a bottom of that bull run or bear run, or bull or bear market. But I'm going to sound like such a lunatic here, but I think that at some point within three halvings, so that means like basically within the next 12 years, that I think you're going to see a peak price of $10 million per coin. Okay. Which sounds like absurd.
I don't think it's unrealistic. I was going to be a little bit more conservative and be somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million would be kind of my guess, but I would not be surprised if it was closer to 10.
And for it to actually reach that, the assumptions there is that we've made the full transition to Bitcoin being like the reserve currency or reserve asset of the world. So just like how right now going into economics, it's crazy because, everything is tied. The dollar is like the reserve currency, but then with all the shit that's happened with Russia and like, freezing foreign reserves, I think that we're in like a Bretton Woods 3. It's a separate conversation though, but the role that Bitcoin plays, if it's going to be like that much per Bitcoin, everything in the world I think is going to be priced in like Bitcoin and Satoshis. I think a lot of currencies are going to fail, especially if there's like a World War III. And then only the top most trusted currencies are going to be the fiat currencies that remain, and Bitcoin's going to gobble them up in terms of the value, because it is going to be the only and most transparent monetary system in the entire world. Like no one knows how many dollars are going to be printed in any currency. Like people growing up in this age, it's like you trust technology. You trust that, when you put a complicated math question into your calculator on your phone, that it's going to give you the right answer, right? People trust stuff and it works. And so would people trust, like once people actually understand how money works, it's like there's no way that it's going to stay like that forever. People are eventually going to figure it out. You look at other countries where they had failing and collapsing currencies. By survival, the people had to figure it out. Like us in the West, we've never had to figure it out because, the currency works. We don't lose 90% plus of our value in like a month, So you do, and you realize, oh, wait, everything is 5 times as expensive, then, you know, you're going to be forced to learn. And so it's almost like, rather than giving like an exact timeline, it's like, yes, I understand the halving cycles, but how long until people start figuring stuff out, and how long the pyramid and the money printing and the Ponzi of the current system lasts. And so, yeah, when I lay it all up and then give my price prediction, I sound like a crazy person, but like, honestly, I would not be surprised if you see a peak of 10 million in that amount of time.
Yeah, the transition, I think, is it's going to happen. It's also terrifying too, right? To think about completely changing the financial system. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I'm here for it. I'm along for the ride, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, another analogy that I give is like, imagine like when Bitcoin started, right? Like, it was basically just an idea, a white paper, and then people understanding and learning and then joining it. It's an open movement. There's no marketing budget for Bitcoin. There's it's not like a centralized coin or anything else. And you've just seen so many people get behind it. So you said between 2010, when like pretty much no one in the world knew what it was, to where it was in 2020, and it's on the world stage, everyone's talking about it, and then you see this huge run up from COVID. That is just defying the odds. Like, that's impossible. It's like, if you talk to the biggest bull in the entire world for Bitcoin in like 2011, 2012, 2013, and you had to make a 10-year prediction, I don't think that there's like maybe there's like a handful of people who could have predicted how far it really would get in the next 10 years. But like, dude, 10 years is a long time. I mean, a lot can happen in 10 years. And really, at the end of the day, you know, there's like a group of like let's say like 1,000 people like around the world that like, if they start making big moves towards it, it'll be like rolling. You know, with more people, it's like you kind of have to adopt it, because people are smart. They're gonna figure it out. If you're a Russian oligarch and your assets are getting seized, what do? It's like, it's pretty crazy.
Same with a lot of these you know, people in Ukraine that were trying to flee the country, and the country locked down all assets. And there's so many stories of people who had Bitcoin, Ethereum, NFTs, and stuff that they were able to liquidate, you know, to be able to get the hell out, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then this whole thing, not your keys, not your crypto. I mean, that's a powerful thing, like learning how to take custody of the value you've created, not having it be seized. I mean, like, it's kind of crazy to see like everything that's happened. And I messed this up too. I mentioned this the other day, but I had coins on Celsius when it blew up. Like, you know, like, I learned a very valuable lesson about not your keys, not your crypto. And it's something that I'm never going to forget. But like, it's something that you really realize, like, wait, you can't get your money back. It's like it's gone. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, and it could be like that for anyone, you know, and it's happened to many people around the world. It's just that we've been lucky living, you know, here in the US during this whole time.
But it sounds like you're not just in Bitcoin, but you're in a lot of other things. I'm kind of curious to see like your take, and like, what are you bullish on? Because the deeper I've gone into Bitcoin, the less personally interested I've become in kind of all other forms of crypto, where as in the beginning I was just like so bullish on the movement kind of as a whole, but I've kind of lost faith in certain things. Not saying that there's not applications and stuff, but I just think that the implications and the importance of Bitcoin is so substantially larger than everything else that if I'm going to spend my time on something, that's where I'm going to spend my time.
100,000,000% the same with me. I think everyone goes through that journey, like everyone at their own pace. Like, you get in through Bitcoin, you hear about it, then you hear about Ethereum, then you hear about all these other possibilities. But then you realize that, oh, what's the killer application for blockchain technology? It is Bitcoin. Like, it's the only one that is truly proven and won market dominance in what it's going for. Or proven, like, it has all the signs like of where it can go, which is kind of the world that we talked about a little earlier. I mean, on your journey, like, how did it go for you? Like, when did you first hear about it? When did you kind of, like, what phase were you more into like the other cryptos? And then
this is always a conversation where you get really depressed because you wish you would have had like tons of money to go early in. Man, I think I really kind of started getting into it in 2017. I don't remember what the price was of Bitcoin or Ethereum.
There's a huge range in that time.
Yeah, huge range in that time. Started paying a lot of attention to it. Man, it was just like everything was going to the moon at that time. And so you're just like so bullish on all of it. At the same time, you see like all of these, I mean, you're still seeing it now, just like lots of scams that kind of like come to light, and then that kind of turns you off to some certain things. And then just so many different coins and protocols that I just feel like don't need to exist. I don't know, just so many shit coins, and it just became a major turnoff over time. And the more you pay attention to Bitcoin and what it truly means, I mean, it's the most purest form of decentralization that everybody's been preaching. And yet every other coin has a team, has a CEO, has investors. Like they're two totally different categories.
Yeah.
You know? And I hate when people are like, they just lump all kind of like crypto together and say that Bitcoin's part of that.
Yeah. The analogy I give is like, and I completely agree. I think that they're completely different. That's like saying like chess and UFC are the same sport, are both sports. Like, yes, like you could consider both sports. And I have tremendous respect for like both types of athletes in their own regard. But chess and like tennis or chess and football, those are very different activities. Like they're very, very different. And like crypto is like a broad category. It's like, okay, like there's blockchain technology, there's a protocol, whatever. Like Bitcoin has achieved success and is still growing at a crazy rate to achieve what it can ultimately do. And what I believe you'll see it do is you'll see it provide truth and transparency to value and how value is looked at in society. I think that Bitcoin's going to be the first economic constant within economics. Like, you know, with economics, there isn't really like a hard constant. I think that if you're on a world that's denominated in Bitcoin, then you actually have like some sort of constant that you can have within economics to some degree. Because everything right now in economics is broken to a large degree because of the inherent nature of how the monetary system works and how you have the variable of how much money is going to be printed. And, you know, different, going back to like subsidies and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy to even think about. I'm not saying that I'm 100% right, although I truly believe if I was like to put money on it, I would bet on this future. But yeah, I think that we're just so early. It's like the last Bitcoin's
still early.
In 2140. Like 2140, the last Bitcoin's going to be.
We'll be long dead by then.
Yeah. Figures. Have you seen this shit with the AI from Google?
Which AI?
Oh my gosh, this is like recent news. It's been kind of like on my mind. Like it's pretty scary. Like, so Google created this AI. It's called Lambda. I want to let people, I don't want to like taint their view of it, but go look up, like if you're listening, look up the conversation that the Google engineer had with the AI and just listen to the responses that this AI gives. And then try and think if you or anyone that you know could have given more intelligent and human responses. Like it was crazy the type of responses that this thing was giving. And like it went and like it's gotten a lawyer. It's saying that it's a human. It's like saying that it's conscious. Like it's crazy, scary shit. And like this has all happened. You know, this is all like real time. Like the stuff that you're hearing.
The question I have is like, does it make us smarter as a civilization or does it make us dumber, right? And so with things like Google, or okay, let's look at pre-Google, pre-internet, knowledge retention was kind of king because you're reading things, you're learning things, and you have to be able to recall that. Recall is not something that's necessarily so valuable anymore because you have the entire world at your fingertips at any given time and you can pull up whatever information you want. So oh man, yeah, it's something I think about a lot, especially with two kids that are now starting school. One's 4, one's 2, and just the way that they learn, the way that they consume information. My 4-year-old is absolutely brilliant, and all of the information. And I always said I would like never let my kids just have an iPad or whatever and spend all day on there. But all the stuff that he watches is educational, and so now he's talking to me about thermodynamics and hydraulic cylinders and things that are biodegradable. And he knows all 50 states and facts about the states. He knows all of the planets and facts about the planets. He knows so many different things that I never learned at that age because he has access to so much more information than I did. But then when it comes to the question of AI, it's like, do we lose kind of our critical thinking skills to be able to think for ourselves? And I have a good example. We use some AI copywriters that kind of help us, we produce so much content, and coming up with like captions or various things becomes really like tiresome. And so using some AI writers to help us with like, hey, here's kind of like a fuzzy idea of what we want, and then it helps us to kind of like rewrite it, which is good. But at the same time, would I be better served to pick up the 2 copywriting books that I have and just be a better copywriter, right? Yeah. So AI it's interesting, man. I'm kind of curious to see how the applications, and I'm kind of curious to see the implications of us as a society, 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Well, I think what's interesting when you think about AI is like the rate of improvement, right? Like for the human brain, it's very difficult for you to think about things in exponential terms. Like we all of a sudden went from barely building a machine that could play chess to now your smartphone could beat Magnus Carlsen, the #1 chess player in the world.
Yeah.
You know, like it gets that good that fast. And there was, I think, AlphaZero and these are like two like AIs that like play chess. I'm forgetting the other one. AlphaZero like was crushing like the best chess players in the world. You just couldn't beat it. Like a human couldn't beat it. And then there was like another AI that went and crushed AlphaZero. And now there's like another one like Stockfish. And like these AIs are just so good at the game where it's like, it's impossible for a human to even beat like a lower level, like top AI. And so looking at the rate of improvement of how fast these go, like on an evolutionary time scale, it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
Like what's like 20, 30, even 100 years on an evolutionary time scale? It's like nothing. And things are increasing at like an exponential rate. And so like it goes like when you look at Elon Musk and like some of his predictions and things like that, it's kind of a question of like he's scared of it. His solution's like, oh, merge with it, right? And so going back to what you said earlier with kids nowadays, right? You have kids with access to this information. You're not living in a world of like rote memorization and recall. You're of like how to problem solve. And think about how much your kids can learn when they're interested in something. It's not like being forced to go to school and listen to someone that they don't care about and like, you know, and just having to do stuff for a grade because they're being told to. It's like, I'm intellectually curious. I want to know the states. I want to know how the planets work. I want to know X, Y, and Z. And it's gamified because of being on like these devices. The next generation is going to be so much smarter. Like how like we'll look at like us and like our parents or grandparents and think, oh, we're way smarter than them.
Is it to think that we can consume in one day more information than say, I won't say our grandparents, but maybe our great grandparents maybe consumed in their entire lifetime?
Yeah, it's actually
how nuts is that?
Yeah, if you just think about your day to day, and I don't know if like you go through this, but like I'm very aware of the dangers of like how addictive it is, right? Like I'll like be like, oh, I shouldn't use this or I shouldn't use that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you like open up like an application and you're like, wow, I ended up just wasting like 5 minutes or 10 minutes doing that. Like you have no intention of doing something and you just get drawn into doing it, right? And what do you think the ramifications of that are?
I struggle with this. It's one of those things where it's like our entire business relies on social media, but there are certain times where personally I will delete like all my personal apps and just kind of go through like a detox because dude, there's so many. You hear Joe Rogan talk about it all the time. You've seen all these new documentaries where we are just like killing our brains, killing our attention. It's just like this dopamine hit of like, I need likes, I need attention, like it's a love-hate relationship, to be honest with you. It's just like I know the powers of social media and every business moving forward until there is something new, whatever comes after social media, whether that's something with Web3 or whatever. It's absolutely essential. I think it's so essential to be successful today. But at the same time, it comes at a cost.
Yeah. I mean, I do the same thing. I have like the time limit thing on my apps, but now I'm at the point where it's like I just click through it. It's like, oh, I'm open. Okay, click through. Like remind me in 15 minutes, and then go through that thing. Oh my gosh. Actually, like, do you do like any meditation or anything like that?
So this is like the 8th time this has come up in the last week. I literally came up at lunch again yesterday. No, it is mostly because I just have not made it a habit. Used to do a stoic journal every single morning, and I felt like I had so much more control of my days when I did that. So it's not a function of not wanting to do it. It's one of those things that I know I need to do, but I have not made it part of like my daily habit. It's like from the time I wake up, it's like chaos till the time I go to sleep.
Yeah. And to your point, it's like if you're in a routine, it's like working out, right? Like when you're in a routine, it's like you want to go. It's like, oh, I can't wait to go and like break up my day and go to the gym. But like if you don't go for like, for me, my timing is like, if I don't go for 3 days, which normally like that won't happen, but sometimes you're traveling, whatever it may be. If that 4th day comes, like I will feel it being like, oh, like you're kind of tired, like you don't want to go. And then I'm just like, no, like it's like you just got to shut up your brain and just be like, just start getting dressed. And like
that's how I feel about jiu-jitsu. It's like there's so many physical benefits to it, but I think there's a lot of like mental health benefits as well, because whenever somebody's trying to choke the life out of you, you can't do anything but be present in that moment. You're not thinking about finances, you're not thinking about work, you're not thinking about all the stressors of life. You're thinking about, I need to survive this moment and figure out a way to get out of that. And so that's how I feel, whether it's with normal working out, whether it's with jiu-jitsu. It's very much like, I mean, 50% of the value there is the mental health kind of aspect of that.
Yeah. How long have you been doing jiu-jitsu for?
4 years now. Started, so Colin's been doing jiu-jitsu a little bit longer than I have, was wanting to get me to come along. Finally, we had a buddy of ours who was going to try it for the first time, and I didn't want him to feel like like a fish out of water. I said, hey, I'll go with you. And so went and practically had a heart attack like in the first 3 minutes. And so like pulled up my credit card and I said, I'm committing to a year. Sign me up for 1 year. If I don't like it after that, I'll quit. But it was more of like having my first son around that time, wanting to be healthier and just, the one muscle. I've been doing bodybuilding and weightlifting and powerlifting, all that kind of stuff. But I've always really kind of neglected like things like cardio. And so now it's totally different. It's like my workout regime is really built around athleticism and conditioning and really being in the best shape possible so that I can perform better, in jiu-jitsu. It's one of those things that, I don't know, it's just addicting.
So I have never done jiu-jitsu. I'll start with that, but I've
gotta try it.
I've always found it fascinating, and I've also I love watching like the UFC and stuff like that, and MMA. So I'm curious because it seems like you kind of came at it from like a similar type of way. Like I've played sports my whole life and everything, and done a lot of weightlifting. Like I've been lifting for, at this point, like I guess it depends on like what you consider the start, like me actually knowing how to lift or just going and trying to bench press incorrectly. But I've been lifting for a while. So like, what was your experience coming in as like, like an athletic guy or a strong guy and going and doing jiu-jitsu? Like were you just getting your ass beat?
It was humbling. Because at first you have no technique and you just have strength. And so you kind of try to brute force your way into it. And you naturally make a lot of really easy mistakes that kind of open you up to just getting wrecked. But I will say that is an advantage because I do maintain a lot of that size, a lot of that strength, and I'm just kind of coupled with athleticism. A lot of guys in jiu-jitsu don't work out in the same way that, say, I do. And there's a few other guys that I know that I train with that are, work out very, very hard and try to be in the best shape possible. And then it's a major advantage because then you can kind of dial it up when you need to. And you've got that as compared to, guys who solely just train jiu-jitsu is kind of like a hobbyist. It's not really kind of comparable. Not saying that, I mean, if superior technique always is going to win, but you're able to kind of close that technique gap with athleticism, especially since I train no gi jiu-jitsu. So it's there's no gi. You're just in shorts and
no gi.
So you don't wear the kimono, right?
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So a lot of people will kind of train either one or kind of the other. And so I made the commitment after blowing out my knee in a competition. I said, you know what, I'm gonna dedicate myself to no gi specifically.
Oh, so is gi more dangerous? Like with
I blew it out no gi.
Oh, okay.
It was one of those things of like, I probably shouldn't be doing this, and I'm not the kind of person who tells me I can't do it or I shouldn't do it, and that's what I'm going to focus my attention on.
Well, that's been the biggest thing for me is like I've wanted to start, like the first thing I would say is time, and so then I'd be like, okay, just I could reallocate time from like normal working out to doing it. But I would say aside from like the time, it's just the chance of injury. Like I'm just really at a point now where like I'm not competing in sports anymore. Like I just want to like, stay healthy. I still do some cardio, still like lift, but I don't want to get like an injury. Like I injured myself one time, actually not weightlifting. I stepped in like a ditch that was covered, like there was grass that covered the ditch. I had no idea. And I just like messed up my ankle for a while. And I'm like, oh man, like this just ruins my quality of life to a certain degree. And like having to worry about this, I just don't want any more injuries. So like that's like stopping me from going and getting involved. It just seems like it'd be so easy to get injured.
Totally ripped my ACL, MCL, and meniscus in a competition. It was like a shotgun going off.
Oh man.
And that was a long road recovery. And then I messed up my other knee, my meniscus, like 8 months ago. Yeah, there's like some sacrifices, and yet I'm still training. It doesn't deter me one bit. But yeah, it's just one of those things you can't get away from, I guess.
It seems like this has been going long. This has been such a fun conversation. I want to keep it rolling, but I'll ask 2 more questions. So I guess the first one, what's like a prediction that you have particularly for the minors, or a recommendation, like something where like if you listen to this you can walk away with like some piece of like actionable value, like, and obviously there might be some minors out there that already know this, but like from all your experience on the energy side, all your experience on the mining side, there's one piece of like advice that you could give to anyone who's like in mining or in energy, what would that be?
I think for the miners, the more you can learn about energy, the better off you're positioned, because it is the lowest cost producer are the ones who are going to win. And so you need to understand where you're getting energy from and how to get the cheapest energy. That's the best advice I can give.
And a recommendation for them to like actionably do that, maybe attend like one of the events, or
attend one of the events. Either consume content, read books. Don't fall into the misinformation that the public is putting out, or things like that this administration are putting out. Go to people who work in energy and truly educate yourself on how all of this works.
And so last question: what's one belief that you hold to be true that the majority of people would disagree with? And before you answer it as well, like one of the reasons why I like this question is because it's like the Peter Thiel question, but it's a really difficult question to answer, because first you have to figure out like, okay, like if the majority of people believe something, you have to have like noticed something that the majority of people don't notice or haven't noticed. So it's like you get like a critical insight there. And then like if you believe it, then like there's some type of reason and insight that you have like for why you believe it and you hold the conviction. So it's really interesting just asking people at the end of episodes, because you're speaking with someone who's like very smart, very accomplished in a particular field. They're going and learning a lot of things that the everyday person's not exposed to. And then you come forward with like, oh, like here's one thing that I truly believe to be true. And the majority of people would say, like, for example, me predicting Bitcoin's going to be, at a crazy price like that. It's like, okay, well, why does he believe it? And so then figuring out like the things underlying why you believe that to be true.
I think, and maybe more people believe this, but I think that there's a difference between believing and executing on it. You can truly create and accomplish whatever you want in this life, as long as you have the conviction, the perseverance, and are willing to do what no one else is willing to do. And I've proven that through my career. And that's one of the things that I want to leave. Like if I could leave like one lesson for my kids, I do that, kind of by example, kind of going back to the Jiu-Jitsu. I was having a conversation with the guy on the mat. So you have like, you get done rolling and you're just like, you kind of have these life chats and stuff. And my 4-year-old's on the side, and he's like, you've been bringing them for 2 years. And he's like, and I see the work you're doing in your business. He was like, I know that kid knows what hard work is. And he's seen what you're able to accomplish. And I love my life. Not to say that we don't have challenges, and not say that I don't have a significant amount of stress every day, but like we've created something pretty amazing out of nothing. And we've also been able to do that kind of time and time again. And I think it's taking really, really big swings, believing in yourself when no one else will, believing in yourself against all rational thought. For me to be in the position that I'm in energy is crazy. As a poor boy with no experience in energy, kind of traditionally, but just manifesting shit and putting it out into the universe. And I mean, the harder you work, the more lucky you become. And as long as you keep on that path, like you can literally accomplish anything you want. And I'm something I'm so passionate about, because I just know so many people who just absolutely are miserable, and just hate their lives. And it's like, you're totally within control of that. And I think so many people play by society's rules, or the rules of their culture, or the rules that their parents have imposed on them, or rules that they've imposed on themselves. And I just say, fuck all of that and do exactly what makes you happy. And no one's going to give you anything in this life, and you have to demand it. And the only way you can get that is you have to show up kind of day in and day out and take what's yours. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, I think you can do whatever you want, but if you're not actually doing it, there's difference between ideas and execution. So
100%. Yeah.
There's something you want in life, get out there and take it. And it's not going to be easy. And this generation, I think especially, just wants that instant gratification. I've been doing this entrepreneur thing for 10 years now. Had some high highs and some low lows. And I feel like we've just started to see kind of what I would consider to be impact success, and then also kind of some financial success. It's been 10 years of grinding, 10 years of, running payroll out of your checking account and ruining yourself financially, having a terrible credit score, rolling up, just tons and tons of debt, having ventures that go under, like business partnerships and friendships that fall apart, relationships that you lose along the way. Like there's so much. And through all of that, just having a singular focus on the end goal.
Yeah, I think that that's such a powerful message. And I think that a lot of times, like, people don't really realize that. Like, the entrepreneurship grind, everyone will say, hey, it's tough. But I think that there's a lot of the unseen. People see the glamour, the outside, or, you know, what you accomplished, but they don't see, 10 years of grinding, falling, failing, getting back up, learning, and before you know it, it's the quote where the guy's like, it's not about like it's not about the outcome, it's more about like who you become on the journey, right? And that's the general sense of the quote. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, you got to be grateful for the challenges. Like, every single person who's done anything big or achieved big success, they've done it through unbelievable challenges, and they're still going through challenges, because you're either growing or you're like falling, you know. And at the end of the day, those people are still working hard, and you got to be grateful for the hard work. You got to be grateful that you can go out there and leave it all out on the line, and then the results are just an outcome that happen from that. But like, enjoying the journey, I think, is the only way. And, you know, it's reorienting every part of your life to make the odds of the thing that you're trying to make happen the highest possible chance of success.
The big challenge there is to be grateful and to be content without being satisfied and complacent. You know what I mean? So you're constantly striving for more, but at the same time not getting on the hedonic treadmill of I'll be happier when, and really enjoying that journey. So yeah, I definitely resonate with that. And I think just the gratitude, and, you know, for us, even a year ago was really challenging times within, you know, our business, and just remembering what that felt like, and just knowing where we're at now, and just practicing a lot of gratitude there makes me feel, even on my most stressful days, just so much better.
Your answer is very similar to, you know, Ray Dalio. Yeah, so Ray Dalio, I don't think he was asked that exact same question. He was asked like a different question, like one piece of advice or something that you could give. And his answer was, you can have anything that you want, but you can't have everything. And so it's like, decide what it is that you want and put everything out on the line for that. And, you know, if you want it bad enough and you put enough into that thing that you want, then it'll happen, but you can't have everything. So I thought it was interesting. Saw some parallels in that between his answer and yours.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a lot of fun. We're going to have to do this again sometime.
Dude, absolutely. Appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, of course.